My name is Stephanie Collins, and at 32 years old, I found myself driving back to my childhood home for Christmas after 5 long years of absence. 5 years of avoiding the pain, the judgment, and especially my brother Bradley. I clutched the steering wheel tighter as memories flooded back, hoping this Christmas dinner might finally heal old wounds. But when I arrived, Bradley greeted me with the same contemptuous smirk he always wore around me. What he didn't know was that I had brought something special tonight. Something that would change everything between us forever. Before I tell you about the Christmas night that transformed my family, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. And hit subscribe to catch more healing stories like this one. Seattle had become my sanctuary over the past 5 years. As a clinical therapist specializing in family trauma, I had built a life that felt authentic and whole, despite the family-shaped hole in my heart. My tiny office overlooking Elliott Bay had become more home to me than the sprawling Colorado house where I grew up. Each day, I helped others heal their family wounds while my own remained painfully open. My family dynamic was complicated, to say the least. My mother, Martha, was a kind-hearted woman who loved her children deeply but lacked the strength to stand up to my father or my older brother. She was the type who would slip me extra cookies under the table while simultaneously failing to defend me when I needed her most. My father, Robert, was a stern, traditional man who expected perfection and offered little affection in return. He ran our household like a well-oiled machine, with strict rules and even stricter consequences for breaking them. Then there was Bradley, my brother who was 4 years my senior. From my earliest memories, Bradley had been the golden child, excelling at sports, bringing home perfect report cards, and charming everyone he met. To the outside world, he was the perfect son, the perfect student, the perfect everything. Behind closed doors, however, he was my tormentor. Mom always wanted a girl. He would taunt me when we were alone. But now that she has you, she wishes she could trade you back. My younger sister Rachel was the only one who truly understood me. 3 years younger than me, she had watched the dynamic play out from a safe distance. We formed a silent alliance against Bradley's reign of terror, finding comfort in each other when no one else seemed to notice our pain. The rivalry between Bradley and me started early. When I was 6, I received an award for my artwork at school. That same evening, Bradley accidentally spilled his grape juice all over my drawing. When I was 12 and joined the school choir, Bradley convinced my parents that my practice was too noisy and disrupted his study time. My singing lessons were promptly canceled. By high school, his methods had become more sophisticated. He would befriend my crushes only to tell them embarrassing stories about me, or invite me to parties only to make me the butt of his jokes. But everything changed drastically 5 years ago. During another Christmas gathering, I had been keeping a secret, one that I wasn't yet ready to share with my traditional family. I was in a relationship with a woman named Amber. We had been dating for nearly a year, and while my friends in Boston knew and celebrated our relationship, I had kept it from my family, fearing their reaction. That Christmas, Bradley had gone through my phone while I was helping Mom in the kitchen. He found text messages between Amber and me, messages that made the nature of our relationship unmistakable. Instead of speaking to me privately, he announced it at dinner, with a casual cruelty that still makes my stomach turn. "So, Stephanie," he had said, his voice dripping with mock innocence, "when were you planning to tell us about your girlfriend? Or were you just going to keep pretending you're normal?" The silence that followed was deafening. My father's face had turned a deep shade of red, my mother looked as though she might faint, and Rachel stared at her plate, unable to meet my eyes. What followed was a 3-hour intervention where my father quoted scripture and my mother cried silently. Bradley sat back with a satisfied smirk, watching the chaos he had created. I left that night and hadn't returned since. In the 5 years that followed, I built a new life with Amber, who is now my fiancé. We had a cozy apartment in Seattle, a circle of supportive friends, and careers we were passionate about. Amber worked as an environmental lawyer, fighting for causes we both believed in. Our life was good, whole in a way my childhood never was. The call came 3 months ago. My mother, her voice small and tired, told me she had been diagnosed with breast cancer. While the prognosis was good, the diagnosis had shaken her. Life is too short for these divisions, she had said. Please come home for Christmas. Just once. How could I refuse? Despite everything, I loved my mother. And maybe, just maybe, this was an opportunity to heal wounds that had been festering for far too long. The drive from Seattle to our small town in Colorado took nearly 16 hours, split over 2 days. Amber insisted on coming with me, despite my protests that she should enjoy the holidays with her own family in Portland. Your family is my family, she said firmly as we packed our SUV with carefully wrapped gifts and winter clothes. Besides, someone needs to keep you from strangling your brother. She was joking. But we both knew there was truth in her words. My relationship with Bradley was volatile at best, non-existent at worst. The closer we got to Colorado, the tighter the knot in my stomach became. What if nothing has changed? I asked Amber as we crossed the state line. What if they still can't accept who I am? Amber reached across the console and squeezed my hand. Then we leave and go get the best hotel room we can find. But you won't know unless you try, Steph. And I think your mom really wants to try. We stopped at a small coffee shop in town, needing a moment before heading to the house. The familiar bell jingled as we entered, and I was immediately transported back to high school, where I'd spent countless hours studying in this very shop. Stephanie Collins, is that you? A voice called from behind the counter. Jessica Parker, my old lab partner from chemistry class, was staring at me with wide eyes. Her hair was different, shorter and with streaks of purple, but her smile was just as warm as I remembered. Jessica, I didn't know you were still in town, I said, genuinely happy to see a friendly face. Oh, never left. Married my high school sweetheart and took over this place from my parents, she gestured proudly around the shop. But you. Look at you, all city chic. Is it true you're some kind of doctor now? I laughed. Clinical therapist, not quite a doctor. This is my fiancé, Amber. Jessica didn't miss a beat, extending her hand to Amber with a warm smile. Any friend of Stephanie's is a friend of mine. First coffee's on the house for both of you. As we settled into a corner table with our drinks, Jessica lingered, clearly bursting with local gossip. So, you're here for Christmas with the family? Have you seen Bradley yet? I shook my head. Heading there now, actually. Why? Jessica lowered her voice. Well, he's changed, that's all I'll say. Got married to Heather Richardson about 2 years ago. You remember her? Family owns half the real estate in the county. He's working for her father now, some executive position. Drives around town in a car that costs more than my house. She paused, looking at me meaningfully. Just be prepared, okay? He's even more full of himself these days, if you can believe it. With that warning fresh in our minds, we finally made our way to my childhood home. The 2-story colonial looked exactly as I remembered it, right down to the slightly crooked wreath on the front door. I sat in the car for a long moment, gathering courage. We can still turn around, Amber offered gently. I shook my head. No, it's time. Rachel answered the door before I could even knock. Throwing her arms around me with such force, I nearly toppled backward. You're here. You're really here, she exclaimed, her eyes bright with tears. At 29, my baby sister had blossomed into a beautiful woman, with our mother's gentle features and a confidence I didn't remember her having before. Rachel, it's so good to see you, I managed, my own eyes welling up. This is Amber. Rachel embraced Amber just as warmly. I've heard so much about you. Thank you for making my sister happy. She lowered her voice as she ushered us inside. Fair warning, Bradley and Heather aren't here yet, but they're coming. He hasn't changed much, unfortunately. If anything, he's worse. The house smelled of pine and cinnamon, just as it always had during the holidays. Mom had decorated with her usual attention to detail, every surface adorned with festive ornaments and family heirlooms. The familiar setting made my chest ache with a mixture of nostalgia and apprehension. Mom appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. She froze when she saw me, her eyes immediately filling with tears. Stephanie, she whispered, as if saying my name too loudly might make me disappear. She looked older, more fragile than I remembered, the effects of her treatment evident in her thinner frame and the new lines around her eyes. I crossed the room and embraced her, inhaling the familiar scent of her perfume mixed with cooking spices. "Hi, Mom. Merry Christmas." She held me tight, her body shaking slightly with suppressed sobs. "You're home. My baby is home." When she finally released me, I introduced her to Amber. Mom hesitated only briefly before embracing her too. "Thank you for coming," she said sincerely. "And for taking care of my daughter when I couldn't." It was a small acknowledgement, but it meant the world to me. Maybe things really could be different this time. Dad's entrance was more subdued. He appeared from his study, looking much the same as he always had, perhaps with more gray in his hair and a slight stoop to his shoulders that hadn't been there before. "Stephanie," he said, his voice formal but not cold. "You made good time on the roads." "Hi, Dad," I replied, unsure whether to hug him or shake his hand. We settled for an awkward half-embrace. "This is Amber." Dad nodded stiffly in Amber's direction. "Welcome to our home." It wasn't exactly warm, but it wasn't the outright rejection I had feared. We were making progress, however small. The relative peace was shattered by the sound of an expensive car pulling into the driveway, followed by the slam of car doors and loud voices. "That'll be the king and queen," Rachel muttered under her breath. Bradley's entrance was as dramatic as ever. He burst through the door without knocking, a tall, blonde woman trailing behind him. My brother had aged well, I had to admit. At 36, he still maintained the athletic build of his college days, though his designer clothes and carefully styled hair spoke of a new level of vanity I didn't remember. "Merry Christmas to the Collins family," he announced grandly, as if bestowing a gift merely by his presence. His eyes landed on me, and I saw the momentary surprise before his features settled into a calculated smile. Well, look who decided to grace us with her presence after all these years." "Hello, Bradley," I said evenly. "It's good to see you too." His wife, Heather, was examining the house with poorly disguised disdain. "Martha, the decorations are so quaint this year. Very traditional." Mom's smile faltered slightly. "Thank you, dear. I've always believed in keeping with tradition." Bradley's eyes moved to Amber, narrowing slightly. "And who's this?" "This is my fiancé." "Amber," I said, emphasizing the word fiancé slightly. "Amber, this is my brother Bradley and his wife Heather." "Fiancé," Bradley repeated, his tone making the words sound like a joke. "Well, isn't that progressive of you?" "Dad, you must be so proud." The tension in the room was palpable. Dad cleared his throat uncomfortably but said nothing. "Dinner's almost ready." Mom interjected quickly. "Why don't we all move to the dining room? Rachel, help me bring out the appetizers, please." As we moved toward the dining room, Bradley deliberately bumped my shoulder as he passed. "Hope you're ready for a real family Christmas, sis," he murmured, just loud enough for me to hear. "Just like old times." The knot in my stomach tightened. This was going to be even harder than I'd imagined. The dining room looked like something out of a Christmas catalog. Mom had outdone herself with the decorations, the large oak table covered with her best linen tablecloth, fine china that only appeared on special occasions, and a centerpiece of pine branches, red candles, and silver ornaments. Place cards marked our seats, and I noticed with a twinge of anxiety that Bradley and I were positioned directly across from each other. "Everything looks beautiful, Mom," I said sincerely, hoping to ease some of the tension that had followed us from the living room. "It certainly took long enough," Bradley commented, inspecting his place setting. "Mom's been planning this dinner since Thanksgiving, haven't you, Mom?" Almost as if she was expecting someone special. The emphasis he placed on special made it sound like an insult. "I wanted everything to be perfect," Mom replied, her smile strained. "It's not often I have all my children home at once." We took our seats as Mom and Rachel brought out trays of appetizers. The traditional holiday spread included deviled eggs, a cheese platter, and Mom's famous spinach dip that I'd missed desperately over the years. Dad took his seat at the head of the table and cleared his throat. "Shall we say grace?" We all bowed our heads. A tradition I'd participated in thousands of times growing up. Dad's prayer was the same as always, thanking God for the food, the family gathered around the table, and the blessings of the past year. I noticed that he made no mention of Amber, despite specifically acknowledging Bradley and Heather's presence. Some things, it seemed, hadn't changed at all. Amen. We all murmured when he finished. So, Bradley, Mom began as she passed the appetizer tray, tell Stephanie about your new position at Richardson Development. He's a senior vice president now, she added, looking at me with obvious pride. Bradley straightened in his chair, puffing out his chest slightly. Senior executive vice president, actually. Thomas just promoted me last month. I'm overseeing all new commercial acquisitions east of the Mississippi now. Thomas being my father, Heather interjected, her diamond bracelet catching the light as she reached for her water glass. Daddy says Bradley has a natural instinct for the business. Not surprising, really, given how successful he's always been. That's wonderful, I said, trying to sound genuine. Congratulations. And what about you, Stephanie? Dad asked surprisingly. Rachel mentioned you're working in Seattle. I nodded, grateful for the opening. Yes, I have a practice as a clinical therapist, specializing in family trauma and reconciliation. It's challenging work, but incredibly rewarding. A therapist. Bradley scoffed lightly. So you listen to people complain about their problems all day? Sounds thrilling. Actually, Amber spoke up for the first time since we'd sat down. Stephanie's practice has a 3-month waiting list because she's so effective. She was recently asked to speak at a national conference on innovative approaches to family healing. I shot her a grateful look as Bradley's smirk faltered momentarily. How nice, Heather said dismissively. Though I imagine the pay must be modest. Not everyone can be fortunate enough to work in the private sector like Bradley. His year-end bonus alone was more than most people make in 5 years. Rachel rolled her eyes. Because money is the only measure of success, right? Stephanie helps people heal their deepest wounds. That's worth more than any bonus. Let's not start an argument, Mom pleaded, getting up to clear the appetizer plates. I'll bring out the main course. I'll help, I offered, eager for a moment away from the table. In the kitchen. Mom bustled around pulling various dishes from the oven and refrigerator. I'm so sorry about Bradley, she whispered when we were alone. He's been difficult since you left. I think he felt abandoned in his own way. Mom, he's the reason I left, I reminded her gently. He deliberately exposed my relationship to hurt me. Mom's eyes filled with tears. I know, sweetheart. And I failed you then. I should have stood up for you, protected you. I was just so shocked, and your father was so angry, but that's no excuse. I hugged her thin frame, feeling her fragility in a way that scared me. It's okay, Mom. I'm here now. We're trying, and that's what matters. We returned to the dining room with platters of roast turkey, mashed potatoes, green bean casserole, and all the traditional fixings. The conversation had shifted to Rachel's work as an elementary school art teacher. The kids are amazing, she was saying enthusiastically. So creative and uninhibited. We just had our winter showcase last week, and one of my second graders sold her painting for $100 to benefit the animal shelter. That's incredible. Amber replied warmly. What a wonderful way to teach them about using their talents to help others. Speaking of helping others, Bradley interrupted. Did Stephanie ever tell you about her first attempt at charity work? She was, 16? I tensed, immediately recognizing where this was going. Bradley. No one wants to hear about that ancient history. Oh, I think they do, he insisted, his eyes gleaming with malice. Stephanie decided she wanted to volunteer at the local homeless shelter. Very noble, right? Except she was so busy trying to impress this boy who also volunteered there that she accidentally served soup with expired milk. 3 people got food poisoning. That's not exactly how it happened, I said tightly. The kitchen manager had mislabeled the containers. I had nothing to do with it. But you were so mortified you never went back. Bradley continued, ignoring my correction. Left them short-staffed right before Christmas. Very charitable. I was 16, Bradley. And I did go back the following week. I volunteered there for 2 more years. Always the saint, he said sarcastically. Saint Stephanie, perfect in every way. Except for her little lifestyle choices, of course. The table fell silent. Dad stared intently at his plate while Mom looked close to tears again. There's nothing wrong with Stephanie's lifestyle, Rachel said firmly. She's happy, successful, and in a loving relationship. Some people might actually take notes. Bradley's eyes narrowed. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing, Rachel backpedaled slightly. Just that there are many forms of success in life. Like I said, Heather interjected coldly, some of us are fortunate enough to have real success. A corner office, an estate in the best neighborhood, vacations in Europe. And some people settle for less. We're quite happy with our life in Seattle, Amber said calmly. Our apartment has a beautiful view of the bay, we have wonderful friends, and work that fulfills us both. How charming, Bradley drawled. A little apartment with a view. Meanwhile, Heather and I just put in an offer on a vacation home in Aspen. 7 bedrooms, private ski access. Dad, you and Mom should come stay sometime. It has an elevator for those who might struggle with the stairs. His pointed glance at Mom made my blood boil. That's enough, Bradley, I said, setting down my fork. Mom's doing well in her recovery, and your passive-aggressive comments aren't helping anyone. Recovery? Bradley feigned innocence. Oh, you mean from the cancer? The illness she went through while you were off playing house in Seattle? The treatments you missed because you were too busy with your fulfilling life to come home? I didn't know about Mom's diagnosis until 3 months ago, I said through gritted teeth. As soon as she told me, I started making arrangements to visit. 3 months to arrange a visit? How thoughtful of you. Mom attempted to intervene. Bradley, please. Stephanie's here now, and that's what matters. Is it though? Bradley's voice rose slightly. She abandons the family for 5 years, refuses to even call on holidays, and now she waltzes back in with her girlfriend. And we're all supposed to pretend everything's normal. Fiancé, Amber corrected quietly. And we're not asking anyone to pretend. We're just asking for basic respect. Respect is earned. Bradley snapped. And disappearing for 5 years because you can't handle a little criticism doesn't earn my respect. A little criticism? I echoed in disbelief. You deliberately exposed my private life to hurt me. You knew exactly what Dad's reaction would be, and you did it anyway, at Christmas dinner, no less. You were living a lie. Bradley shot back. Someone had to tell the truth. It wasn't your truth to tell. Dad finally spoke up. That's enough, both of you. This is Christmas dinner, not a boxing match. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. You're right, Dad. I'm sorry. We ate in uncomfortable silence for several minutes, the only sounds the clinking of silverware against plates. I noticed Rachel shooting me sympathetic glances while Mom looked close to tears again. Dad ate methodically, his expression unreadable as always. I decided to try once more to salvage the evening. The turkey is delicious, Mom. Just like I remember. Thank you, dear, she replied, visibly relieved at the change of subject. I used Grandma's recipe for the stuffing too. I can tell. I said warmly. No one makes stuffing like you do. The tension seemed to ease slightly as we discussed neutral topics like Mom's recipes and the unusually heavy snowfall this winter. For a brief moment, I allowed myself to hope that the worst was behind us. Then it happened. As I reached for the gravy boat, Bradley's hand shot out, deliberately blocking mine. I looked up to find him staring at me with that familiar smirk, the one that had haunted my childhood nightmares. Oh, were you going to get more food? He asked with mock surprise. I thought you were done. After all, your plate's outside with the dogs. The words hung in the air like a physical presence. No one moved. No one spoke. Mom's fork clattered against her plate, the only sound in the suffocating silence. I looked around the table at the faces of my family. Mom stared down at her lap. Dad examined his water glass as if it contained the secrets of the universe, and Rachel looked horrified but paralyzed. No one was going to defend me. Just like before. They would sit in uncomfortable silence while Bradley tore me down. Some things, it seemed, never changed. I felt the blood drain from my face as Bradley's words registered. 5 years away. And nothing had changed. I was still the family outcast, the one they could hurt with impunity. My hands began to tremble, and I set down my fork to hide the shaking. Under the table, Amber's hand found mine, her fingers intertwining with my own in a silent show of support. Her touch anchored me, reminding me that I wasn't alone anymore, that I had built a life filled with love and respect outside these walls. As I sat there, a slideshow of memories flickered through my mind. Bradley hiding my homework the night before it was due. Bradley telling my first crush that I still wet the bed. Bradley accidentally breaking the science project I'd spent weeks perfecting. A lifetime of deliberate cruelty designed to make me feel small, less than, unworthy. But something else surfaced too, something I'd nearly forgotten. My therapy supervisor's words from years ago. Sometimes, forgiveness isn't about the other person deserving it. It's about you deserving peace. In my professional life, I'd guided countless clients through family reconciliation. I'd witnessed transformative moments of healing between parents and children, siblings, spouses. I'd seen how understanding could bridge even the widest chasms of hurt. Was I really going to abandon those principles when it came to my own family? Without a word, I stood up from the table. Bradley's smirk widened, clearly assuming I was about to storm out. Instead, I walked calmly to the front door, retrieved my coat, and went outside to my car. The December air was bitter cold, the driveway illuminated only by the warm glow filtering through the dining room windows. I could see my family still seated at the table, their silhouettes rigid with tension. From the trunk of my car, I retrieved a small, carefully wrapped package, one I hadn't been sure I would give tonight. When I returned to the dining room, all eyes turned to me. Bradley looked triumphant, Heather bored, Mom anxious, Dad uncomfortable, and Rachel hopeful. Amber watched me with quiet pride, trusting whatever decision I was about to make. Without fanfare, I placed the small wrapped box directly in front of Bradley. It was wrapped in simple silver paper with a blue ribbon, nothing elaborate. "What's this supposed to be?" Bradley asked, suspicion evident in his voice. I took my seat again, my heart pounding, but my voice steady. "Open it." "It's not even Christmas yet," he protested, but curiosity was getting the better of him. "Consider it an early gift," I replied. "But before you open it, check under your plate." The confusion on his face was almost comical. Heather looked annoyed, clearly not appreciating being upstaged. Bradley hesitated, then slowly lifted his dinner plate. Underneath lay a sealed envelope, a check, and a faded photograph I'd carefully placed there while helping Mom set the table earlier. "What the hell is this?" he demanded, picking up the check first. His eyes widened as he registered the amount. $50,000? "Is this some kind of joke?" "No joke," I said quietly. "The letter explains everything. Would you read it aloud, please?" Bradley stared at me for a long moment, then tore open the envelope with less care than it deserved. He cleared his throat and began to read, his voice betraying his confusion. "Dear Bradley, this check represents a donation made in your name to the National Alliance on Mental Health. Specifically, it will fund a new program providing therapy services to adults who experience childhood emotional trauma. The program will help people understand how early experiences shape adult behavior and how to break cycles of pain and resentment. I chose this donation because my work has taught me something important. When people lash out with cruelty, it's almost always because they're carrying wounds of their own. As your sister, I've experienced firsthand the pain you can inflict. But as a therapist, I've come to understand that your behavior likely comes from your own unhealed hurts. Look at the photograph. Do you remember that day? You were 10, I was 6. A neighbor's dog had gotten loose and cornered me against the garage. You put yourself between me and that dog without hesitation. You were my hero that day. I believe that version of you still exists beneath the walls you've built. The brother who protected me, who taught me to ride a bike, who helped me with my math homework when Dad lost patience. I don't know exactly what shaped you into the person who would tell me my place is with the dogs. But I forgive you, not because you've earned it, but because I deserve the freedom that comes with letting go of this pain. The gift in the box is a key to healing if you choose to use it. With love and hope. Stephanie. As Bradley finished reading, his voice had lost its usual arrogance, becoming smaller and less certain with each word. He stared at the photograph for a long moment, his fingers tracing the image of his younger self standing protectively in front of me. "Open the box," I said gently, with uncharacteristic care. Bradley untied the ribbon and removed the silver paper. Inside was a small wooden box with a simple brass latch. He opened it to reveal a business card nestled on a bed of velvet. "Dr. James Wilson, clinical psychologist," he read aloud, "specializing in family dynamics and male trauma recovery." He looked up at me, his expression unreadable. "You're giving me a therapist for Christmas?" "I'm giving you an opportunity," I corrected. "James is one of the best in his field. He's helped many people understand why they feel compelled to hurt the ones closest to them. He has an opening in January, and he's agreed to hold it for you. Whether you use it is entirely your choice." Bradley stared at the card as if it might bite him. The dining room remained utterly silent, everyone watching his reaction with bated breath. When he finally looked up, his face had flushed a deep red. "This is ridiculous," he said. But his voice lacked conviction. "You think I need therapy? You think there's something wrong with me?" "I think you're hurting," I replied calmly. "And I think you've been hurting for a very long time." "You don't know anything about me," Bradley snapped, but the words sounded hollow, even to him. "I know more than you think," I said. "I know that no matter how hard you tried, you never felt like you were enough for Dad. I know that you excelled at everything because you were terrified of disappointing him. I know that you married Heather as much for her family's status as for love. And I know that despite all your success, you still don't feel secure." Bradley's jaw clenched. "You're making this up. Psychobabble nonsense." "Bradley," Mom interrupted softly, "she's not entirely wrong. You've always been so hard on yourself. Even when you were little. You would practice throwing a baseball for hours, crying if you couldn't get it perfect." "That's called dedication, Mom," Bradley retorted. "Something Stephanie wouldn't understand. Running away at the first sign of difficulty. Is that how you see it?" I asked. "I didn't run away from difficulty. I removed myself from a toxic environment where I wasn't accepted for who I am. There's a difference." "And what about us?" Bradley demanded. "You just left without a word. No calls, no visits. You abandoned your family." "I reached out multiple times that first year," I countered. "I called on birthdays, holidays. I sent cards and emails. But the responses were cold, judgmental, or non-existent. Eventually, I stopped trying to connect with people who couldn't accept me." Dad shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Perhaps we could have been more receptive," he admitted reluctantly. "Perhaps?" Rachel echoed incredulously. "Dad, you told Stephanie she was no longer welcome in this house unless she corrected her lifestyle." Mom cried, but didn't defend her. "And Bradley, you acted like you'd won some kind of victory. I was the only one who stayed in touch with her. And I had to do it secretly because you all made it clear that supporting Stephanie was tantamount to betrayal." Heather, who had been watching this exchange with growing discomfort, finally spoke. "This is all very dramatic and unnecessary. Bradley has built a successful life. He doesn't need therapy or forgiveness or whatever this little performance is supposed to achieve." I turned to her, seeing clearly the insecurity beneath her polished exterior. "Heather, has Bradley ever told you about his childhood? About how her father would make him practice his baseball swing for hours in the backyard, even in the rain? How he wasn't allowed to come inside until he'd completed 100 perfect swings? How he would go to school with blisters on his hands that he had to hide?" Bradley's face drained of color. "Shut up, Stephanie. You don't know what you're talking about." "I know because I watched it happen," I continued gently. "Just like I watched Mom turn a blind eye because she was too afraid to stand up to Dad. Just like I watched you transform from a protective older brother into someone who tore me down to build yourself up." Mom's quiet sobs broke the tension. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I failed both of you. I should have protected you." "The point isn't to assign blame, Mom," I said. "The point is to understand why we are the way we are. Bradley bullied me because he was bullied by Dad. Dad was hard on Bradley because Grandpa was hard on him. It's a cycle, and it continues until someone decides to break it. So you're breaking it by humiliating me in front of my wife? Bradley asked bitterly. By acting like you know me better than I know myself. No, I replied. I'm breaking it by refusing to respond to cruelty with more cruelty. By trying to understand you instead of just writing you off as a lost cause. By offering you a path to healing instead of revenge. Bradley laughed, but it was a brittle sound. And what makes you think I need healing? I have everything I ever wanted. A successful career. A beautiful wife, respect in the community. Do you? I asked quietly. Because from where I'm sitting, you have a job your father-in-law gave you. A marriage based on status rather than partnership, and the kind of respect that comes from fear rather than admiration. And despite all that, you still feel the need to put down your sister at Christmas dinner to feel powerful. Heather bristled. How dare you suggest our marriage is anything less than perfect? Bradley adores me. Does he? I asked. Or does he adore what you represent? The ultimate achievement, the final proof that he's worthy. Bradley stood up so suddenly his chair tipped backward, crashing to the floor. Enough. You don't get to come back after 5 years and play amateur psychologist with my life. You don't know me anymore, Stephanie. You don't know anything about my marriage or my career or what I want. You're right, I conceded. I don't know you anymore. But I remember who you were before Dad's expectations and your own insecurities turned you into this person. The brother who taught me to ride a bike. The brother who stood between me and danger without hesitation. The brother who used to sneak into my room after I had nightmares and tell me stories until I fell back asleep. Bradley's anger seemed to deflate slightly, replaced by something more vulnerable. That was a lifetime ago. It doesn't have to be, I said softly. That version of you still exists. Bradley. He's just buried under years of pain and resentment and the desperate need to prove your worth. I don't need to prove anything, he insisted, but his voice wavered. Don't you? Isn't that why you need to remind everyone how much money you make? Why you belittle my career and my relationship? Why you can't let a holiday dinner pass without trying to assert your dominance? Bradley said nothing, his breathing heavy, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. The truth is, I continued gently, you're still that little boy in the rain. Swinging a bat with bleeding hands, desperate for Dad to say, good job, just once. Stop, Bradley whispered, his voice cracking. You're still the teenager who brought home straight A's only to have Dad ask why you didn't get the Academic Achievement Award too. I said stop. Bradley's voice rose. But there was pain behind the anger now. And you're still the young man who believed that if you could just be perfect enough, successful enough, impressive enough, then maybe, just maybe, you'd finally feel worthy of love. The room fell silent except for Bradley's ragged breathing. For a moment, I thought he might lash out physically, but instead, something seemed to crack in his carefully constructed facade. His shoulders slumped, and without another word, he turned and strode from the room. Heather looked stunned, torn between following her husband and maintaining her dignity. This is absurd, she declared to no one in particular. Bradley is perfectly fine. You've all filled his head with this nonsense about childhood trauma and cycles of pain. He's a successful, respected businessman. There's nothing wrong with him. No one said there was something wrong with him, I corrected. There's something wrong with what happened to him and how it shaped him. There's a difference. Heather glared at me. Then at the rest of the family. I'm going to check on my husband. When I return, I expect this topic to be closed. She stalked out of the dining room, her heels clicking sharply on the hardwood floor. In the silence that followed, Dad cleared his throat. Stephanie, he began hesitantly, I think perhaps there might be some truth to what you're saying. About Bradley. About how I raised him. He paused, struggling visibly with his words. And about how I treated you. Both then and 5 years ago. It was perhaps the closest thing to an apology I'd ever heard from my father, and it left me momentarily speechless. Robert, Mom said, reaching for his hand across the table. We both failed our children. In different ways, perhaps, but we failed them nonetheless. Rachel wiped tears from her eyes. I'm just glad we're finally talking about this. All these years of pretending everything was fine when nothing was fine at all. It's not too late to change things, Amber said, speaking for the first time since Bradley's outburst. My own parents didn't speak to me for 3 years after I came out. Now they call every Sunday and send birthday cards to both Stephanie and me. People can grow. Relationships can heal. Is that really possible for us? Mom asked, her voice small but hopeful. After everything that's happened. I wouldn't be here if I didn't think so, I replied. That's why I came. Why I brought those gifts for Bradley. Not to humiliate him, but to offer a chance at something different. Something better. And if he refuses? Dad asked. Then that's his choice, I said. We can only control our own actions, not others' responses. But at least I'll know I tried. The sound of a door slamming echoed through the house, followed by the revving of an engine and the crunch of tires on the gravel driveway. That would be Bradley and Heather leaving, Rachel observed dryly. Subtlety never was his strong suit. Mom looked crestfallen. Do you think he'll come back? I don't know, I admitted. But the invitation stands, whether he accepts it today or a year from now. Dad nodded slowly, thoughtfully. You've changed, Stephanie. Grown up. Become wiser somehow. Therapy will do that, I said with a small smile. Both receiving it and providing it to others. Perhaps. Dad said hesitantly, it might do the same for the rest of us. It wasn't everything I'd hoped for, but it was a start. A crack in the wall that had separated us for so long. A possibility where before there had been only silence and rejection. And for tonight, that was enough. An hour passed, during which we cleared the dinner table in near silence. Each lost in our own thoughts. Mom insisted on sending leftovers home with Amber and me, packing containers with far more food than 2 people could reasonably eat. It was her way of showing love. I knew when words failed her. Do you think we should go? I asked Rachel quietly as we loaded the dishwasher. Maybe coming back was a mistake. Rachel shook her head firmly. Don't you dare leave. This is the most honest conversation this family has had in decades. It's uncomfortable as hell, but it's necessary. Your sister is right, Dad said from the doorway, startling us both. He'd been so quiet since Bradley's departure that I'd almost forgotten he was still in the house. I think it's time we talked. Really talked. We moved to the living room, where Mom and Amber were already seated, an awkward distance between them on the sofa. Dad took his usual armchair while Rachel and I perched on the love seat opposite. I don't know where to begin. Dad admitted, his hands fidgeting uncharacteristically in his lap. I've never been good at expressing myself. That's an understatement, Rachel muttered, earning a warning glance from Mom. It's okay, Dad, I said. Maybe start with what you're feeling right now. He looked uncomfortable with the suggestion, but after a moment's hesitation, he continued. I feel regret. For many things. For how I raised Bradley, pushing him so hard he never felt good enough. For how I reacted when you told us about your orientation. He couldn't quite meet my eyes. I was raised to believe certain things were wrong, sinful. I never questioned those beliefs until they cost me my daughter. Mom wiped away tears. We both regret so much, Stephanie. The way we handled everything, it was wrong. We were shocked and scared and confused, but that's no excuse for rejecting our own child. Why were you scared? Amber asked gently. Mom looked surprised by the question. I suppose. We were afraid of what people would think. What our church would say. How it would affect Bradley and Rachel. She paused. Realization dawning on her face. We were afraid of all the wrong things, weren't we? We should have been afraid of losing you. Of causing you pain. I was afraid too, I admitted. Afraid you'd never accept me for who I am. Afraid I'd have to choose between my authentic self and my family. Afraid of exactly what ended up happening. I didn't know how to protect you. Mom said, her voice breaking. When Bradley exposed your secret that way, I should have stood up to him, to your father. I should have embraced you instead of sitting there in shocked silence. And I should have recognized that my religious convictions don't trump my responsibility as a father, Dad added quietly. Jesus never taught rejection or cruelty. I failed to live up to my own professed beliefs. Rachel reached over and squeezed my hand. I failed you too, Steph. I kept in touch, but I should have done more. Spoken up more. Challenged them more. You were barely in your 20s, I reminded her. It wasn't your responsibility to fix the family. Still, I could have done more. Amber, who had been listening attentively, finally spoke. May I share something? When no one objected, she continued. My family reacted similarly when I came out. My father didn't speak to me for nearly 3 years. My mother would call, but only to tell me how I was breaking her heart and ruining my life. It was devastating. Mom looked pained. What changed? My younger brother got sick, Amber explained. Leukemia. During his treatment, we were all forced to be in the same room, to focus on something more important than our differences. One night, after a particularly rough day, my father broke down. He told me he was sorry. That life was too precious and too fragile to waste on judgment and pride. Is your brother? Dad began hesitantly. He's in remission now, Amber assured him. But that experience changed all of us. My parents realized that their love for their children was more important than their discomfort with who I am. Now they've fully embraced Stephanie, too. My mom calls her daughter and asks when we're going to give her grandchildren. She smiled at the memory. I wish it hadn't taken cancer for us to realize the same thing, Mom said softly, glancing at me. When I got my diagnosis, even though the prognosis was good, it made me see how precious time is. How much I've missed by letting pride and fear keep my daughter away. It's not too late, Mom, I assured her. I'm here now. We're talking. That's a start. Dad cleared his throat. I want you to know, Stephanie, that while I may still be learning about your lifestyle, I am trying. I want to do better. To be better. Thank you, Dad. That means a lot. And Amber, he continued, visibly pushing himself beyond his comfort zone. I apologize for not acknowledging you properly. You are clearly important to my daughter, which means you should be important to me as well. Amber nodded, accepting his awkward but sincere attempt. Thank you, Mr. Collins. Robert, he corrected. Please call me Robert. The sound of tires on gravel interrupted our conversation. Headlights swept across the living room wall as a car pulled into the driveway. Bradley's back, Rachel observed, peering through the curtains. Alone. We all tensed as the front door opened and closed. Bradley appeared in the living room doorway, his hair disheveled, his eyes red. He looked like he'd been crying. Something I couldn't remember seeing since we were children. I thought you'd be gone, he said, looking directly at me. We're still here, I replied simply. He nodded, shoving his hands into his pockets. Heather went home. We had words. I'm sorry to hear that, Mom said automatically. Bradley shrugged. Don't be. She called me pathetic for letting my freak sister get under my skin. Said I needed to man up and put you in your place. He laughed humorlessly. Turns out, she's not so different from Dad after all. Dad flinched at the comparison, but didn't deny it. Where's the check? Bradley asked abruptly. I frowned. It's still on the table, I think. Why? Because I don't want it, he said. I don't need your money, Stephanie. It's not about need, I explained. It's about supporting a cause that could help people like us. Like us? People from families where love was conditional. Where worth was measured by achievement. Where vulnerability was seen as weakness. Bradley was quiet for a long moment. I'll make my own donation, he finally said. A bigger one. To the same organization. It's not a competition, Bradley. Everything's a competition, he replied automatically. Then caught himself. At least, that's how I've always seen it. It doesn't have to be, I said gently. Bradley nodded, looking suddenly exhausted. Can we talk? Just you and me? I glanced at Amber, who gave me an encouraging nod. Of course. We moved to the front porch, where 2 rocking chairs sat facing the yard, just as they had throughout our childhood. The night was cold but clear, stars visible in the vast Colorado sky in a way they never were in Seattle. I don't know how to do this, Bradley admitted after we'd sat in silence for several minutes. I don't know how to apologize. I've never really had to before. Just say what you're feeling, I suggested. No strategy. No agenda. Just the truth. He took a deep breath. The truth is, I've been jealous of you. For as long as I can remember. That surprised me. Jealous? Of me? Why? Because everything came naturally to you. You were smart without trying. People liked you without you having to impress them. Dad was hard on you, sure, but in a different way. He expected me to be perfect. With you, he just seemed disappointed that you wouldn't conform. That didn't feel any better, I pointed out. I know that now, Bradley acknowledged. But back then, all I saw was that I was killing myself to earn scraps of approval, while you seemed free to be yourself, even if that meant disappointing him. I wasn't free, I corrected. I was just fighting a different battle. You were trying to be perfect enough to earn love. I was trying to be authentic enough to deserve it. Bradley was quiet for a moment, considering this. When I found out about you and women, it was like I'd finally found something I could use against you. Proof that you weren't so perfect after all, at least not by Dad's standards. He looked ashamed. It was petty and cruel, and I knew it would hurt you. That's why I did it. I know, I said softly. How can you forgive that? He asked, genuinely puzzled. How can you sit here and talk to me like I'm not a monster? Because you're not a monster, Bradley. You're a person who is shaped by pain, just like the rest of us. And because holding on to that anger was hurting me more than it was hurting you. Is that what your therapist told you to say? He asked, but there was no malice in the question. I smiled slightly. No, it's what I learned by being a therapist. By watching people heal from much worse betrayals than what happened between us. The therapist card in the box. Bradley began hesitantly. Was that for real? Do you really think I need help? I think we all do, in different ways, I replied honestly. But yes, I do think you might benefit from talking to someone who isn't entangled in our family dynamics. Someone who can help you sort through why you feel compelled to compete, to dominate, to win at all costs. Bradley nodded slowly. Maybe you're right. He looked out at the snow-covered yard. For what it's worth, I am sorry. For what I did 5 years ago. For what I said tonight. For all of it. Thank you, I said simply. That means a lot. So what now? He asked. We just pretend the last 5 years didn't happen? Play happy family for Christmas. No, I replied. We acknowledge the hurt, the mistakes, the lost time. And then we decide, consciously, to try building something new. Something healthier. Bradley was quiet for a long moment. I'd like that, he finally said. I don't know if I know how, but I'd like to try. It wasn't a guarantee. It wasn't a magical resolution that would erase years of pain and dysfunction. But it was a beginning, a fragile bridge across the chasm that had separated us for so long. And for tonight, that was enough. 1 year later, I found myself driving down the same snowy Colorado road, heading to another Christmas dinner at my parents' house. Amber sat beside me, her wedding ring catching the winter sunlight as she fiddled with the radio. Nervous? She asked, finding a station playing Christmas classics. I considered the question. Not nervous, exactly. Cautiously optimistic. A lot can change in a year, Amber observed. She was right about that. The past 12 months had been a journey of gradual healing and tentative reconnection. It hadn't been easy or linear, but we'd made progress I wouldn't have thought possible that fateful night a year ago. Bradley had indeed made an appointment with Dr. Wilson, the therapist whose card I'd gifted him. Initially resistant, he gradually opened up about our father's expectations, his own insecurities, and the toxic patterns he'd developed to cope. 3 months into therapy, Heather had left him, claiming he'd changed and was no longer the powerful, dominant man she'd married. The divorce had been messy but mercifully quick. To everyone's surprise, Bradley had seemed almost relieved when it was finalized. She wanted the version of me that was killing me inside. He'd explained during one of our now regular phone calls. The guy who needed to control everything and everyone, who measured his worth by his bank account and his power over others. My parents had made their own strides. Mom had joined a support group for parents of LGBTQ+ children, finding friendship and guidance among others navigating similar journeys. Dad, ever the stoic, had agreed to attend family therapy sessions with Mom, Bradley, and me when I visited. He still struggled with certain aspects of my identity, but he was trying, which was more than I'd ever expected. Rachel had gotten engaged to her longtime boyfriend Daniel, a kind, soft-spoken music teacher who treated her with the respect she deserved. She'd asked me to be her maid of honor, a role I'd accepted with tears of joy. Perhaps the most surprising change had been in my own life. Amber and I had decided to move closer to Colorado, settling in Denver where I'd opened a small therapy practice specializing in family reconciliation. We weren't in my hometown, but we were close enough for regular visits, for building the relationships that had been fractured for so long. As we pulled into my parents' driveway, I saw Bradley's new car already parked there. No longer the ostentatious luxury vehicle he'd driven before, but a practical mid-size sedan that reflected his shifting priorities. He'd started volunteering at a local mental health center, using his business expertise to help them secure funding and expand their services. It was a small thing, perhaps, but a meaningful step toward becoming the person he wanted to be rather than the person he thought he needed to be. Mom greeted us at the door with warm hugs, looking healthier than she had in years. Her cancer was in remission, her smile genuine as she ushered us inside. Dad stood a few steps behind her, less demonstrative but no less welcoming in his own quiet way. "Merry Christmas," he said, actually initiating a hug with both Amber and me. "We're glad you could make it." "Wouldn't miss it," I assured him. The house smelled of pine and cinnamon, just as it always had. But the atmosphere was different. Lighter somehow, less burdened by unspoken tensions and carefully maintained facades. Bradley emerged from the kitchen, an apron tied around his waist. "Finally. I was beginning to think you'd gotten lost. The Yorkshire pudding is almost ready, and I need someone to taste test." "Since when do you cook?" I asked, hugging him hello. "Since I realized I actually enjoy it," he replied with a sheepish grin. "Turns out I like creating things more than I like making deals." Who knew? Rachel and Daniel arrived shortly after, completing our family circle. As we gathered around the table, I couldn't help but marvel at the contrast with the previous year. Where there had been tension, there was now cautious warmth. Where there had been barbed comments, there was now genuine conversation. It wasn't perfect, but it was real in a way our family interactions had never been before. After dinner, as we sat around the living room exchanging gifts, Bradley pulled me aside. "I have something for you," he said, handing me a small, wrapped package. "It's not much, but I wanted you to have it." I unwrapped it carefully to find a framed photograph, the same one I'd placed under his plate a year ago. Him at 10, me at 6. His arm protectively around my shoulders after the incident with the neighbor's dog. "I had it restored," he explained. "The original was pretty faded." "It's perfect," I said, genuinely touched. "Thank you. I keep a copy on my desk," he admitted, "to remind me of who I want to be, who I can be, when I'm not letting fear drive my actions." "You're already becoming that person," I assured him. "I see it every time we talk." He smiled, a genuine expression free from the smirk that had once been his default. "I have a long way to go, but for the first time, I feel like I'm on the right path." Later that evening, as Amber and I prepared to leave, Mom pulled me into a tight hug. "Thank you," she whispered, "for not giving up on us, for showing us another way." I almost did give up, I admitted, but I'm glad I didn't. "We all are," Dad said, joining the embrace in a rare display of physical affection. This family needed healing. We just didn't know how to ask for it. The journey of the past year had taught me so much about healing, forgiveness, and the complicated nature of family bonds. In my professional life, I'd always known that understanding was the first step toward reconciliation, but experiencing it firsthand had deepened my insight in ways I couldn't have imagined. The pain of rejection and betrayal had been real and devastating. There had been days when getting out of bed seemed impossible, when the weight of my family's rejection had threatened to crush me. But gradually, with support from Amber, from friends, and from my own therapist, I had found a path forward. I'd learned that forgiveness isn't a single act but a process, one that requires constant recommitment. I'd discovered that sometimes the people who hurt us most are fighting battles we know nothing about. And most importantly, I'd realized that true healing comes not from pretending the hurt never happened, but from acknowledging it fully and then choosing to build something new from the ashes. As we drove away from my childhood home, the Christmas lights twinkling in the rearview mirror, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in years. The road ahead wasn't perfectly clear, and there would undoubtedly be more difficult conversations, more painful revelations, more work to do. But we were moving forward together, each of us committed to breaking the cycles of hurt that had defined our family for too long. Sometimes, the greatest gift we can offer someone who has hurt us isn't something expensive or grand, but simply the opportunity to become a better version of themselves. And in that process, we often discover a better version of ourselves as well. A version that is stronger not despite the pain we've experienced, but because of how we've chosen to heal from it. The holiday season is always a time for reflection and connection. What family dynamics have you had to navigate in your own life? Have you experienced healing and reconciliation? Or are you still on that journey? Share your story in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe if this resonated with you. Remember, healing is always possible, even in the relationships that seem most broken. Thank you for listening to my story, and from my family to yours, I wish you peace, healing, and the courage to build something beautiful from whatever pain you carry.